So today is the 4-year anniversary of me posting the very first video under the name Sean Chandler Talks About, and it was my review of Ghostbusters 2016. I went to go see the movie with my wife on a date night, and just kind of on the whim was like, hey, what if I made a review of this on that dormant YouTube channel that I have that I don't do anything with? And here we are 4 years later. It's turned it into a whole new career for me and kind of a dream job to have. But what exactly was in that first review? How was it? I'm going to rewatch it. I haven't watched the whole thing probably since the day that I edited it years ago. I've just seen little clips from the first minute when I've shared my story a little bit. So I'm a little terrified of exactly whatever this will be like, but I'll try and give some insight, thoughts on growth, and fun stories all along the way. And let's watch my first review.
After 20 years of Dan Aykroyd trying to get his own Ghostbusters 3
how
made,
young
they got
I
canceled.
look.
They decided to make a reboot with an all-female cast. The internet went nuts, and now we have the movie. So how is it?
Very loud intro. So I even had the name Sean Chandler Talks About. I didn't realize that at first that I had that name all the way from the beginning. But
you know the general idea of Ghostbusters. A team of scientists get together to capture ghosts in New York City.
That wall is the same wall that you're seeing in the video.
It's the
I've just
same
painted
basic
it.
plot with little ingredients changed. There's a group of people that are scientists that have been studying ghosts. After paranormal activity starts popping up in New York City, they decide to form a group to try and capture them, and then they run into trouble with the city. They run into trouble with ghosts. People don't believe them. People do believe them, and crazy hijinks ensue. It's very much the same plot and template as the original, but like I said, they swap out ingredients. The characters are a little bit different. A different type of person happens. The plot is a little bit different.
Different type of person happens.
But it's the same basic idea. It's a comedy. It's a little horror. It's a little bit of action. It's a special effects extravaganza. It's a little bit of all of it. And even though it's this very safe thing that we loved in our childhood, if you're my age, the internet has been going crazy about this movie since they announced it.
Let's pause right there. So it's interesting watching all this because it's kind of the same way I start my videos right now, which is like little intro, bumper starts up, and then I kind of explain the plot, except I explain the plot of the movie for like a minute straight in case you didn't know what Ghostbusters was. Like, who doesn't know what Ghostbusters is or anything like that? So it's always interesting when you have something that, I don't know. It's like watching it like why am I still talking? Why am I still explaining the plot to the movie? But even here, it still kind of has the taste of what I try to do now, which is like, let's talk about the conversation about the movie. So I'm still on the right path. It's also just interesting to see how, like, I've always had the hand move. I've always done this stuff all the time, but it's also a much more like restrained version. It's like me dialed back a whole bunch. So as I went along, it's like I cranked up the energy more as opposed to less.
Reason that they decided to remake a beloved thing from our childhood and change it to an all-female cast. And at the end of the day, I'm just going to be pretty straightforward. It's an enjoyable movie. It's funny. It's
controversial.
Fun, but it's not legendary. It's not going to change the world. It's just an enjoyable film. As much as the internet wants it to be
having
awesome
such a
or
hot
awful,
take right out of the
that's right
gate.
in the middle, leaning on the good side. So the good things, they got the right cast. When they first announced this movie and they said it was going to be a female cast, a bunch of us started predicting who would be in it. And Kristen Wiig and Melissa McCarthy were both on my list. And I guessed you'd have some SNL people thrown in there too. That's exactly what we got.
Pause. So right off the bat, even my structure, I guess, was kind of in place of that, the good and the bad. I think I do it a little bit different, but that's something I actually, going back to some blogs that I'd started in the past talking about movies, I'd always kind of had that structure in mind of trying to want to have things to be organized so you know where things fall and things like that, not just kind of like rabbit trail, going all these paths where people kind of just wander around. I just always thought it was a little bit better of an idea to be a little bit more pointed, sorted, where do things fall. And like the mixed category that I do now in my movie reviews, that kind of came about because I was like, there's stuff I know I like, there's stuff I know that's bad, and then there's that other stuff I want to talk about. Where do I put it so it's nice and organized? If you're talking about an MCU film, you know there's that post-credit scene. Where do I talk about that that's not necessarily saying whether it's good or bad? And so that's kind of where my structure came from, and you could see the early version of it even in my very first video.
And it's the reason we got it is because they're the obvious picks, and therefore they do as good of a job as you'd expect. They're funny, they fit well together, they have nice chemistry. The special effects from the trailers, I wasn't sure if it was going to be a little bit too cartoony, but it fits the movie and the tone that they're going for. And really, Chris Hemsworth for me was probably the funniest part of it because he's
having seen this movie 20 times now, I would still agree Chris Hemsworth is the funniest
part that he just kind of pops up into scenes for little bits of time, and it just works. The biggest problem with this movie is they play it so safe. They get the safest cast, the safest director. And then when it comes to the jokes, there's so many of the obvious jokes you're expecting. And then they know people love the original, so they want to put in all these little nudges to the original and little cameos of the original cast. But the way that plays out is you're just waiting to see who's the taxi driver. You're waiting to see who's the uncle, who's the specialist. And every time they do it, it's like, wink, they're coming, the hit, it's coming. And you're waiting for this cameo,
right there.
And the person shows up and you're like, oh, you know, look.
Not like I'm being a little bit kind on it. I've seen it a bunch of times because my daughter likes it. So the idea that my daughter's into a scary movie and Ghostbusters, it's like that's how you find those gateways of getting your kids into nerd culture. You let them like terrible things from time to time. And so I've seen it a lot. It obviously changed the course of my life. So it's the movie that I can't hate. I don't. I'm very middle of the road on it. That's kind of what I'm saying here in this review. I'm a little bit too kind about a few things in the way that I'm phrasing it. But actually, I'm having some pretty good little insights in the way I'm articulating things. And one of the things I always try to do now is be specific in talking about what I did or didn't like or what did or didn't work. And so I was thinking I'd be a little bit more broad and generic in the way that I talked about some things, but I'm kind of pointing out like the whole movie feels like it's a bunch of setups for Ghostbuster Easter eggs. Like, oh, okay, that's a good observation that I phrased. I think I said nudges instead of Easter eggs or something. Like, I don't know what a nudges is, like nudging the audience, I guess is what I meant to say. But, you live, you learn, you grow, you get better.
It's coming, and you're waiting for this cameo, and the person shows up, and you're like, oh, look, that's kind of amusing, but it's not a clever joke. It's not like they had great material. It's just they took a totally boring part in the movie and just have someone you recognize play the part. So you're like, oh, look, Bill Murray. Oh, look, Dan Aykroyd. And they keep doing it over and over again, and it's safe jokes playing exactly to what you want. And that's really the biggest problem with this movie. They played it so safe. While they changed the story and that the ghost plot is different, it's the same template as the original one. And so they just kind of swap out who's this person, who gets possessed in this one.
I said
when
the
does
same
this
thing
happen?
earlier.
It's just the same template, the same beats with different ingredients. To the extent that, if you get Melissa McCarthy, you get Kristen Wiig, it's going to be funny. It's going to be watchable and enjoyable.
Most
Paul
people
Feig
would
is a good director.
disagree with that sentiment.
He's going to make something that makes sense, that flows nicely, that you're going to enjoy. But the problem is they're
still
just
itch my
playing
face
it
during
so
videos.
safe. And it's so exactly what you're expecting that at the end of the day, they're batting for a single, and they hit a single. And so it's good. They got on base. I enjoyed it. I didn't feel like I wasted my time.
Once again, lots of people disagree with that.
But at the same time, if you're doing Ghostbusters, why wouldn't you swing for the fences? Why wouldn't you go for something more ambitious than, it's Ghostbusters and it's women? And that's really the only big, brave step they took. And I guess that's the way it played out. Maybe it's good they only took that one brave step because the internet still went nuts over it.
Let's pause right there. Yeah. So a lot of this just getting pretty repetitive, and even thinking through like what I feel like I've always thought about this movie. I'm not saying a bunch of stuff. Maybe it's because I've been watching the director's cut for the last 2 years. That's the version of it that I own, that I got at some point in time. And the director's cut has like 20 dance sequences in it. So there's stuff to me that it's like, obviously you have to talk about how often they're just doing dance numbers. You have to talk about how much of it is very obvious that it's just people riffing. They didn't write funny jokes. They didn't write comedy that fit the movie. They were just sitting there riffing. That just seems really obvious to me. And I'm missing that. I'm just putting all of that in the category of safe, obvious humor, which what that kind of means, I interpret what I'm saying there as, if you're familiar with Melissa McCarthy, Kristen Wiig, Paul Feig, you know the types of humor that they have in these movies. And that's a lot of what you get here, which is why it doesn't fit in Ghostbusters, because Ghostbusters was always like a well-crafted, well-written movie with good jokes in it, whereas this is, let's let them riff in the world of Ghostbusters. So there's a bunch of stuff that I feel like I missed, but I probably shouldn't be too hard on myself.
So at the end of the day, I'd give it a 7 out of 10. It's
7
a
out
good
of
movie.
10.
It's an enjoyable movie.
I might still agree with that. I'd probably go 6.5 now.
Really quick. I don't know if the movie was short or if it just went so fast. I was like, oh wow, we're already to the end. That's pretty fun. Like the time just flew by really quick. So it's a good movie. It's not a great movie. They play it safe. They aim for a single. They got a single. But I'd recommend seeing it if you enjoy the premise. It's a lot better than the trailers. The trailers are not as funny as the movie, or not enjoyable as the movie. The cast isn't as good in the trailers as they are in the movie. So don't trust the trailers. It's a good movie, not as bad as the trailers. And if I'm being honest, when this comes on cable, if I have it on Blu-ray, if it's on Netflix, I'll probably watch it quite a bit. It's the type of movie to easily put on in the background. You'll enjoy it. You'll have a good time. Doesn't take too much away from you. But yeah, it's a good time. I'd recommend you see it. If you like this video, please like and share, and please click that subscribe button and check out more videos when they come out. Thank you.
All right. So, couple things there on the last little section of it. The first one, like my ending goes on for like a whole minute of me being like, so I had fun with it. It wasn't a waste of time. It was not as bad as the trailers. I had a good time with it. It wasn't as bad as I thought. Like saying that's a lot of that stuff that I did before. Hopefully I don't still do that. Maybe I do. I don't really know. But hopefully I don't do that. Other one on there, in my early reviews, I had this whole section called If I'm Being Honest. Like here's my score, and then here's my If I'm Being Honest, kind of my direct, how would I say it in simple language? That's how I did my movie reviews. I think for the first couple of years, I don't remember, I switched from that and just kind of started to doing the letter and the number to trying to use objective metrics to communicate it. But the whole idea was, okay, I'm trying to communicate my score right here, and just like, what would I say to my friend if I was talking to my friend right here? And that's the idea of like, if it's like an action movie, I have a bias towards this. If I'm being honest, like I had a lot of fun with it. I don't know if you will because you're not into these movies. So I had this whole section where I tried to do stuff like that, and I eventually dropped it because I just wanted to incorporate that language into all of the reviews and everything that I kind of do. So all right, just watching it, if I were to kind of give some feedback, what I think about my first review, I think it's certainly, for the amount of content, probably should have been about a minute and a half shorter because I repeated myself a few times as I've repeated myself in this video saying that. It could have been a little bit more specific. I think I missed some really big, obvious stuff in there. But in general, while not necessarily having the energy that I normally have, I think I articulated what I was saying pretty well. It was clear. It wasn't like confusing or anything like that. So I can't pick on myself too much on this young baby-faced version of me. No B-roll or anything like that. Just my little intro with an explosion that was really loud. But, with your first video, you don't know if you're going to stick with it, so you don't know how much to put in there. But, yeah, not nearly as bad as I was thinking. No, not too bad at all. Now, I have some prototype videos from even further back before this, from back in 2013, and those ones get a little bit rougher and started more awkward and said things that was like, oh dear, what was I thinking on that one? This was actually kind of bland, not the best one to react to because there wasn't a bunch of juicy little bits to make fun of myself for. But anyway, you can check out that other content for my 4th anniversary right there. Got the 10 best moments. That's over on my second channel. Down there, we got the best bloopers of the first 4 years. And thank you, truly, thank you so much for sticking with me over all this time. It has changed the course of my life, and keep talking movies too much.